Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. I'm here today with David Golan, the CTO and co-founder at Viz AI. And today we're going to be speaking about maintaining an AI product in healthcare. So welcome to the show, David. It's so great to have you today.
Thanks. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me. It's really great.
definitely. And could you just tell the audience more about your background and some of the things that you're working on?
My background, I've been doing AI related stuff over the last, 18, 19 years now. Started as it's a defense forces. After I was discharged, I joined a small startup called Beehive Networks. We were doing smart monitoring of data centers and used AI and machine learning for that. We were acquired by VMware. I spent some time at VMware and then left to pursue an academic career in Tel Aviv University, then moved to Stanford for a postdoc when deep learning was sort of taking off. It was a very fortunate timing, and started doing my research in deep learning applications. And around that time, I met my co-founder, Dr. Chris Mancy, who's a neurosurgeon by background. And we got together around our shared interest in stroke and acute care, and founded Viz AI with the goal of helping patients get better treatment faster.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to use data within the world just to improve the tech space. And so, how does data help with care coordination with healthcare providers and the patients?
Yeah, so before we talk about data, let's spend like 1 minute talking about the problem. And stroke is a prime example. Stroke is, first of all, it's a big deal. It's the number 3 or number 4 killer in the Western world. It's by far the number 1 healthcare expense because patients often need assisted living and other treatments are very costly. And it's the single most time-sensitive condition. Every minute of delay in the treatment translates to 2 million dead neurons, 4.2 days of disability, and $1,060 cost to the healthcare system. So super time critical, a huge healthcare problem. And still very few patients, under 10%, actually get proper and timely treatment. People always ask me, how is this possible that we have this huge gap between the high acuity and cost and healthcare and financial cost of the disease versus how not so well we're doing with treating those patients. And the reason is care workflows. Care workflows are extremely complex, and the typical care workflow for a stroke patient involves calling 911, getting to the ED, getting a CT scan, getting that scan read, getting the results communicated to a neurologist, starting a discussion regarding a surgical intervention, coordinating a transfer of the patient, advanced imaging, interpretation of the advanced imaging. There's like 20 different stops, 20 to 30 different players, different stakeholders who need to communicate with one another, need to exchange data and information. There's just so many opportunities for disconnects and delays. And that's just the sad reality that most patients either don't get the treatment in time or they get it with hours of delay. So this is really the problem that we set out to solve. Viz, starting with stroke, but then aiming for essentially all of healthcare coordination. And the way we do it is by turning what we like to call this serial process, the serial clinical workflow, into a parallel process. And to do that, we connect all the hospitals to the cloud. We connect all the CT scanners to the cloud. All the scans go up to the cloud. In the cloud, we have our AI engine that reads the scans and identifies the acute pathology. We identify strokes, we identify brain bleeds, working on other pathologies. And once the AI identifies that this patient has a stroke, it immediately broadcasts an alert to the relevant stakeholders. So instead of going through this long series of handoffs, this very, very complex and serial clinical workflow, so we cut through the red tape and immediately notify the decision maker at the end of this long chain. We give the information to everybody. They have a nice mobile app, so they get the alert, they get the scans, they can talk with each other, and very quickly make a decision within minutes instead of hours. Transfer the patient if needed, activate the team, get everybody together, treat the patient much faster, driving much better outcomes for the patient.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear how data could be used within the healthcare industry with, patients and healthcare providers. And with this data that you work on, I'm sure there's a lot of high regulation with the data that you work with and the data that you access. And so, what is it like working with data and the FDA?
So, I mean, regulation definitely plays a big role in our space. Essentially, our software is a medical device, is regulated as a medical device, and as you said, you have to go through the FDA, and it's definitely a very interesting experience. We have found the FDA to be actually a very surprisingly supportive partner. So they have their job. Their job is to protect patients, the patient safety, and they're not willing to cut any corners, which is a good thing. But they're very reasonable, and you can have conversations with the FDA, understand what's important to them. They want to understand the development methodologies, the data collection methodologies, to make sure that they're sound, that they make sense. Eventually, you define what's called a pivotal study, which is the evidence that you will collect to demonstrate the efficacy of the device that you're developing. And you conduct this study, you collect this data, submit it to FDA, and then they approve, hopefully approve or clear the device for marketing. And then you can start selling it in the US. In our case, for example, the FDA, we've been discussing this with the FDA for some time, and we've agreed that what's important is the accuracy of the algorithm in terms of sensitivity and specificity. And then there's some good methodology on how you collect data that would be unbiased. You want to make sure that you have ethnically diverse population. You want to make sure that you have different variations of the pathology and so on, that you have age, sex, the diversity. And we agreed that we need to show significant time savings, because if this is about saving time, please show us time savings. And then, our pivotal study demonstrated high sensitivity and specificity and time reduction of, on average, 52 minutes. And that has prompted FDA to clear our device. It was the first FDA clearance of this kind. It was a pretty big deal. February 2018, the FDA actually put out a press release on this before we did, because they were excited by the fact they created this new category called computer-aided triage, where the computer helps identify acute cases and sort of make sure they get the attention of the right doctor. And actually, we're very proud to say that now, 3.5 years later, there's, I guess, 50-something medical devices approved under this category for conditions ranging from stroke like ours to free abdominal gas to rib fracture to breast lesions and a lot of other applications, driving better care for patients worldwide.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear how data could be really used with the FDA, and just there's a lot of complications that come with it, I'm sure. Just working with data, especially in the healthcare field, I'm sure there's a lot of challenges that come with working in this field. So what is a specific challenge that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so I think the entire AI industry, and it's even more pronounced in the healthcare industry, as we're maturing, we're starting to understand what it means to maintain an AI product in production. And you realize that launching it is hardly even the beginning. And actually, there's more effort in maintaining it than there is in just building it. And I'll just give some examples. So definitely there's a Red Queen problem here, where first adopters of AI technology would be, the best medical centers in the country, right? They're cutting edge, they love technology, they have the money, they have the vision, they want to attract talent, so they want like cool and sexy technology. But they also have best scanners, the best technologists, and everything there is the best. So you get very high quality scans. And as we've grown from one center now to over 750 across the US, and you start seeing those rural places, those freestanding EDs, places that don't have the same level of funding, the same level of experience. You start seeing really older scanners, less experienced technicians. You start seeing low quality data. So in a sense, even if you keep your algorithm and don't touch it, performance will degrade over time. So there is a constant effort to just stay in place, not to mention that always want to push the performance up. And that is actually a pretty big deal. We've put much more effort post going live than before going live with any of our products. There's a lot of internal infrastructure around each of our products, how we monitor it in production, how we identify the mistakes, how we feed that back into the system and learn from it to release a new version that is better. And it's just, if there's one thing I would have communicated to my younger self is really to plan for that, to allocate, to plan in hiring, to plan in building the systems, to plan building the processes, and just, what we're learning is sort of the AI industry or an AI product behaves differently from a pure software product in terms of there's a long tail of issues, there's a long tail of problems, and just need to constantly push and constantly invest and have dedicated people working on that and have dedicated infrastructure. So I think that's one thing. The other big thing that is obvious is that AI is not a product. AI is part of a product. So in our case, we have the AI that detects stroke, but the fact that we have a mobile application where the physicians can get the images and a chat where they can communicate is just as important to achieve the value, to realize the value proposition. And I always tell people, product is much greater than algorithm, and also need the company behind it, right? Because if a physician cannot log into the app because they forgot the password and they're having trouble with the reset password button, then all your fancy AI is not delivering any value, right? So, you need to set up the tech support, you need to set up the infrastructure for that, you need everything. You need to build the company behind the product and the product behind the AI. And it's just, I see a lot of people who are sort of very AI focused, they want to develop this, and they sort of, from here, they don't see, they jump in their heads to, selling this and leveraging this, but you really need to plan the product, to understand the problem, understand the needs, understand the delivery mechanism of the information of that you're producing with your AI, and it's it's part of the fun, but it's also really a necessary condition for success, or for at least for our success. It was.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing some of the challenges that you've had in the industry. Your line of work sounds super interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people, the next generation, are always also trying to go into the data industry with the intersection of healthcare. And so, what advice would you have for those interested in a field that's similarly to yours?
Yeah, I think for data people, we're very technical people, engineering folks. We tend to walk around with hammers and look for nails. So we tend to think sort of solution first. In general, in any industry, but definitely in healthcare, I think it's really important to put aside for a second your 5, 10, 20 years of experience with AI and focus on the problem. Make sure that you've identified a clinically valid problem, an unmet need, something that generates value, something that people would pay for. Understand in healthcare, the US system is a funny one. Understand the providers, the payers, the financial incentives, reimbursement. Only once you've convinced yourself, and ideally others and some investors, that this is a problem worth solving, then you can take a step back and ask, what technology can I use to solve this? Don't start from the solution. And I've seen many companies who were like, hey, we know AI, let's do AI on radiology. And they've developed amazing algorithms, but there was no demand for that in the market, or they failed to commercialize because they were not solving a real problem. And at Viz, despite the 20 years of background in AI, we sort of went problem first. We had identified a problem in care coordination for acute conditions, specifically stroke and brain hemorrhage. And we said, how can this be fixed? Well, AI can be part of the solution. Also mobile app, also using the cloud to communicate between physicians. And problem first, solution later. Put your data person aside for a second and focus on the product, on the problems.
Yeah, definitely. Great advice for people who want to go into a similar position as yours. And David, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today on the Data Standard. Where can everyone find you online to connect with you?
So I guess the two best places are either LinkedIn, search for David Golan, Viz AI, you'll find me, and I accept everybody. I never reject anyone. Or if you want to chat, you can email me at david@viz.ai. I typically respond within a few days. So hang in there if I'm not responding. And I would love to hear from people who are sort of embarking on a new journey, especially in healthcare. That's what I know. I feel like I know more than other domains. Yeah, that's it. That's how to get in touch with me.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you so much, David, for joining me today. It was so great to hear more about your experiences and everything that you are working on in the intersection of data and AI and healthcare. So thank you so much for being on our show.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great experience.